When my own brother stood on my porch in his tailored corporate suit and handed me a 30-day eviction notice, he was smirking like he'd already won. He thought he was stealing 15 years of my hard work. He thought he was taking our father's legacy right out from under me. But what Jason didn't realize was that exactly 30 days later, he'd be standing in an empty, muddy field, staring at a single wooden stake in the dirt. Because I didn't just pack a suitcase and walk away. I took every single board of my house with me. My name is Mark. I am 50 years old. I've run a custom carpentry and contracting business in Owen County, Indiana for over 20 years. I'm a blue-collar guy. I believe in hard work, a handshake that means something, and respecting your blood. 3 months ago, I learned my younger brother only respects family when there's a dollar sign attached to it. It all started when our parents passed away, 6 months apart. They left behind a 40-acre homestead. On the western corner sat our family's old barn built by my father back in 1944. When the county condemned that barn years ago, I spent months saving the timber myself, hand-planing every solid white oak beam. That's when I found my father's initials, RG, stamped deep into the wood. With my parents' blessing, I used that exact timber to build my own home on 5 acres of their land. It was my pride and joy, built with my own money and my father's sweat. Then my mother's health started to fade. Jason, a corporate finance manager who hadn't swung a hammer in his life, took over her medical power of attorney. While she was heavily medicated and confused in her final weeks, Jason had her sign a new will. By the time the estate cleared probate, all 40 acres, including the 5 under my house, belonged to him alone. I tried to be reasonable. I met him at a diner in town and offered to buy my 5 acres at full market value. Jason didn't even look up from his phone. "It's not personal, Mark," he said, stirring his coffee. "A developer called Vanguard Homes is buying the whole 40 acres. The sale requires the land to be completely cleared. Your house is in the way." "I built that house, Jason," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Our father's barn is in those walls. His initials are on the beams." Jason just slid a manila folder across the table. "Legally, it's a fixture of the land," he said with a cold, dead stare. "You built on property you didn't own. That makes it mine now." "Family's still family, Mark, but business is business. You've got 30 days to clear out." I didn't shout. I didn't throw a punch. I picked up the folder, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Thank you for making things clear." I walked out, drove home, and the second my front door clicked shut, my knees gave out. I sat on my kitchen floor in the dark, absolutely crushed. I had trusted my brother, and he had used that trust to legally rob me.
Uh, Man, that's the kind of betrayal that is different. Using the trust itself as a weapon.
For 2 days, I was paralyzed. I was ready to sign the developer's release and let him bulldoze it all. But on the third night, something wouldn't let me sleep. I called Vanguard Homes, pretending to be a local subcontractor asking about grading work, and managed to get my hands on their preliminary site plan. I stared at that blueprint, running my finger over the layout. Then I saw it, right in the center of my 5 acres. Vanguard wasn't planning to bulldoze my house at all. On the blueprint, my home was circled and labeled the clubhouse and sales office. Jason had negotiated a $400,000 premium by selling my craftsmanship as their community centerpiece. He wasn't just evicting me, he was selling my sweat and our father's timber to line his own pockets. A cold, heavy resolve settled over me. I drove straight to the Owen County Courthouse and pulled my original building permits from 15 years ago. Then I took them to Arthur Vance, a retired attorney who'd known my father. Arthur read through the paperwork, chewing on his glasses. Then he stopped. A slow smile spread across his face. "Mark," he said, "your brother just made the biggest, most arrogant mistake of his life. Look at this permit." Arthur pointed at the yellowed paper. "You filed this 15 years ago under your construction business as a relocatable timber trade structure, not as a permanent residential fixture on the land." Arthur leaned forward. "Legally, that means your company owns the building, not Jason, not the land." And Jason just gave you a 30-day written order to remove your personal property from his site. So, that's exactly what you're going to do. I called my crew immediately. 6 of the best carpenters in southern Indiana. We're going to dismantle my home, I told them. Piece by piece. We've got 3 weeks. We started before sunrise the next morning. Within days, we'd stripped the cabinets, pulled the windows, and peeled back the drywall until nothing was left but a bare skeleton of beautiful white oak. On the 12th day, Jason's black SUV came roaring up the driveway, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. He jumped out, his face pale with panic. "What the hell are you doing, Mark?" he screamed over the roar of our generators. "I have a contract with Vanguard. I'll have you thrown in jail." I climbed down from the scaffolding, wiping the sawdust off my hands. "I'm complying with your eviction notice, Jason," I said calmly. "I'm removing my personal property from your land." "This isn't personal property, this is a house." "I'm calling the sheriff?" "Go ahead," I told him.
He is way too calm right now. Jason has no idea what's coming.
The sheriff's cruiser showed up 20 minutes later. Deputy Miller looked at the half-torn-down frame, then at Jason, who was demanding my immediate arrest for destroying a $500,000 asset. I just handed Deputy Miller my folder, the original trade permit, the corporate receipts, Arthur's signed legal opinion. Miller read through it slowly. Then he closed the folder, turned to Jason, and handed it back to me. "He's allowed to do this," Miller said plainly. "His permits show his company owns the structure. Your own written notice ordered him to clear the site. This is a civil matter. I can't arrest a man for moving his own lumber." Jason's jaw dropped. He looked like he was going to be sick. He threw his SUV into reverse and fled. 2 days later, Jason dragged me into an emergency county court hearing. His high-priced lawyer demanded an immediate injunction, accusing me of corporate sabotage. But Arthur had prepared for this. He handed the judge my original tax filings and the Vanguard site plans. The judge looked them over, slammed his gavel, and looked Jason's lawyer right in the eye. "The tenant is recovering his own documented trade assets under a strict eviction timeline that your client enforced," the judge ruled. "However, the tenant has exactly 48 hours to finish removing his property before this court reevaluates the land disturbance." 48 hours. We were out of time. We worked straight through the night, blasting floodlights into the cold air. To make things worse, a severe storm rolled through. 60-mile-an-hour winds hit the exposed timber frame. I watched the main beams sway in the dark. If those joints twisted even an inch, 15 years of work would splinter into kindling. We threw heavy steel cables over the rafters and winched them down to our trucks in the mud. By sunrise, our hands were raw, freezing, and bleeding. But the frame stood straight. We kept pushing, driving out every wooden peg by hand. I touched the beams my father had carried 80 years before me. By the time the 48-hour clock expired, the entire frame was stacked safely on flatbed trailers, 3 miles away on my new piece of land. My crew filled in the old foundation holes, graded the soil, and covered the bare dirt in clean, yellow straw. There was absolutely nothing left to see. On day 30, the eviction officially expired. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Jason's SUV pulled up. Behind him, a silver luxury sedan carried 2 executive representatives from Vanguard Homes. Jason stepped out with a triumphant, arrogant smirk, ready to hand over the keys to his $500,000 flagship clubhouse. Then, he stopped. The smirk vanished. His face drained of all color. He stared at the empty, straw-covered field, his chest heaving. He turned in a slow circle, like the house might magically reappear if he just blinked hard enough.
I would pay to see that look on his face live.
The Vanguard executive, a tall man in a tailored overcoat, walked up beside him. "Jason," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "where is the historic clubhouse?" It was right here," Jason stammered, pointing at the empty air. "My brother! He stole it!" "He didn't steal anything," I said, walking out from the edge of the tree line. They all turned to look at me. Dusty boots, canvas jacket, tool belt. The eviction notice required me to remove all my property from the land by today, I said, looking directly at the Vanguard rep. The structure was mine. My company owned the permits, so I took it with me. The executive's face went from confusion to pure fury. He turned on Jason. Our contract specifically required the acquisition of the historic timber structure. It was the flagship centerpiece of this subdivision, the executive shouted. We paid a $400,000 premium for that asset. Without it, our marketing campaign is dead. Our zoning approval is delayed for months. This contract is void. Wait, I can build a replica, Jason pleaded, grabbing the man's arm. We can hire someone. We don't want a replica, the executive snapped, pulling away. We wanted the authenticity. Have your lawyers call ours. We're clawing back the deposit. He walked back to his sedan and slammed the door. The silver car sped off, leaving Jason entirely alone in the empty field. You ruined me, Mark, Jason screamed, his voice breaking as it echoed across the valley. For the first time in my life, looking at my own brother, I didn't feel a shred of pity. I leveraged everything for that contract, he cried, falling to his knees in the dirt. I owe the private investors $600,000. I'm stuck with raw dirt, and they are going to take everything else I own. I walked to the center of the clearing, right to where a single wooden stake was driven into the earth. I tapped the stake with my boot, looked down at my brother, and said, "You wanted the dirt, Jason. You got it." I turned my back on him, climbed into my truck, and drove away. It took us 3 months to raise the frame again, this time on a beautiful hillside overlooking a quiet, wooded valley. Yesterday, my crew and I drove the final white oak peg into the master beam. I climbed down the ladder, walked into the center of the living room, and looked up. The morning sun was pouring through the high windows, lighting up the deep grain of the white oak. High on the main beam, my father's initials, RG, stood out perfectly clear against the wood. I placed my hand over them, ran my fingers across the grain. For the first time in months, the heavy weight in my chest was gone. I was finally home.
That's the story, folks. Here's what I take from it. Money can change how family treats you, so get things in writing before you bury your life on someone else's land. And staying calm always beats losing your temper. That's the real win here. So, yeah, though it was a fictional story, but it teaches a very good lesson, I would say. So that's it for today. Hope you like it. See you in the next. Till then, take care and bye.